I tend to write a lot of horror. I'm a monster maker. So Cotton, it's about Caribbean supernaturals as a whole, set in Guyana. I wrote Silk Cotton as a love letter to the tapestry of storytelling in the Caribbean. We have very diverse nations living in the Caribbean. It does form the foundations of the Caribbean psyche. Silk Cotton, it is not just story, it is the stories that all children are told in the Caribbean. In our psyche, it's real, it exists, it's happened. It was never written down, it was transported by word of mouth. So it required speaking to storytellers. It took a fair bit of history and digging and researching and trying to find imagery. I wanted to introduce the Caribbean supernaturals to a new audience, and especially an international audience, and then to make them relatable. The young protagonist is Peter. Like every other kid in the Caribbean, he's grown up being told the stories. So of course he thinks it's just stories, but then it turns out that actually they're about his family, and he's a supernatural. Like local supernaturals in Guyana are like Masakuruman. He's all about the waterways. And then we have Kanaima, which is a native Amerindian revenge spirit. So we have one that is called a Bahut, and he comes from Indian supernaturals. It's all about a woman who has passed away in childbirth, but she's still connected to the child. The child is living and she's not there. Water Mama, which is very famous across Africa. We call them fair maids in Guyana, which is more like a mermaid, a kind of very scary mermaid. And there's also other mixed cross ones that I've included in Silk Cotton, like Chickchani, which comes from Andros Islands in the Bahamas. And also, let's face it, we're in 2025. No supernatural is walking around looking like they really do. They look like me and you, they live next door, they have electricity. Silk Cotton is really about family and about saving the stories. That's it in a nutshell. I mix genres, to be honest. I don't have a strict line of what is sci-fi, what is fantasy, and what is horror. I do mashups of them. In Guyana, comics are just silly little books. Essentially, comic books are just used like newspaper wrapping. So that's how I first met comics, wrapped up in sweet potatoes. So I unwrapped this really colorful paper. I looked and I was shocked because it was a dude on a surfboard in the middle of space, and he was silver. That's how I met the Silver Surfer, and that's how I met comics. He's still my favorite superhero. Then I found that there were local comics being made by a man called Rudy Seymour. I have a very strange process. I don't actually start writing the story until it's fully complete. So for me, the story comes in a full completion, and then I start to write it. I would give that to the artist and he would make a storyboard. We'd go through it. Then we would start the process of making the comic, penciling it. And then we ink that, a black and white. And then if I'm going to color the book, then the colorist takes over. It's normally thematic, and I normally will put notes for that. In Silk Cotton, there's a lot of yellows and oranges because the Olag is a fire supernatural. Masakuruman is very much about the waters, and he's very much about the forest. So he's green, and Water Mama is sort of more watery blue. These are the themes that you can see in the book. So Shook, some chaps got together who are from the South in the US, and they wanted to make basically Southern Gothic horror. They wanted to tell black horror stories, but from a black perspective. They decided to make this anthology, which is called Shook. And that was very well received. It was taken on by Dark Horse. The first volume was a male. So this time around, it's women telling horror from a black perspective. And so I am the collection editor on that. And it's called Shook, Songs of the Dark Sirens. If men understood what was in women's minds, they would fear us because it's very terrifying things in there. I mostly enjoy creating stories that are diverse, and I like to write strong women and strong characters. What comes out in November is a mini-series called Vic Argus, Species Negotiator. It's about what happens when a group of people who were designed for one thing have actually exceeded those parameters and are now independent. They're thinking for themselves and they now want to have the option of choice. So it's about a fight for their own individuality and survival. It was sort of influenced by my journeys through Africa and in particular Congo Zaire. I saw lots of children with guns and I was thinking, what is their future? So when I wrote Vic Argus, it's really about that opportunity for future. Shakespeare's Vampires is a bit more lighthearted. Fabrice Sapolsky, he wanted to tell the story of Romeo and Juliet being vampires and that it involved William Shakespeare. He approached me and I thought it was a very fascinating thing. I set the story in Camden, in the catacombs. It's a cross point between the city and the quirky and the unusual and funky vampires are. All those things. It's a whole battle. It's out on the 22nd of October. Being the first Black woman published by Caliber Comics was shocking. I had thought that there must have been predecessors, but it turns out that there haven't been. We need more women in comics, certainly more diversity in comics. I like to push the boundaries and to let readers know that there are other choices, there are other stories that are being told. There's still that way of looking at how a comic is and what a comic is. When you come from a marginalized background, you do not fit those norms. So in a way, I'm kind of having to build my own steps as I go. I think that's the challenge for marginalized creators, building their own steps. There's the first graphic novel award, which helps to showcase marginalized groups of people. And Thought Bubble Comics Festival, which happens in November every year. It is a very diverse comic convention because it's also about indie comics and people that you wouldn't see at a big comic convention. Make the comics you love and keep making comics. No matter what anybody tells you, draw if you can draw, write if you can write. Tell the stories you want to tell. If you're a comic book reader and there's a particular artist that you like the style of, go and follow them and see what they're doing. Go to conventions, explore the comics world in real life. Get involved. If you're a new creator, persevere, make the comics that you love and enjoy them. You're not making it for someone else, you're making them for you first and foremost. And if you love them and some other people love them, then you're already on your way.